Welcome to the San Jose, Santa Clara Regional Wastewater Facility Contractor Safety Training.
The wastewater facility is a very active location. Truckers haul in sewage waste for disposal. Facility workers travel to their work locations using electric carts, bicycles, and by foot. Workers walk to and from meetings and buildings continuously. Please follow the 20 miles per hour maximum speed limit and use caution while driving on the facility roads.
The use, possession, and distribution of controlled substances, weapons, or any sort of explosives while on facility premises, in facility vehicles, or other vehicles while on facility business is strictly prohibited.
Smoking is only permitted in designated areas. When smoking, you must stay a minimum of 25 feet away from any doorway or window, chemicals, compressed gas cylinders, tanks, digesters, and piping that conveys hazardous material. Smoking is also prohibited in San Jose's vehicles, per the San Jose Human Resources Policy. If you do smoke, dispose of cigarette butts in approved canisters to prevent fires and to keep the facility clean. One of the expected contents of the tanks and piping is sewage that could be raw, diluted, mixed with chemicals, or be in tanks that are stirring and aerating. These activities can create mists around the area of the tank. Use good hygiene and hand washing practices while here on the job, at breaks and lunch, and do not eat or store food openly around wastewater tanks. Wash hands with soap and water before eating, drinking, or smoking.
If there is a need to evacuate the building you are in, an alarm will activate. Evacuate immediately when you hear an alarm or siren. Stay calm and leave tools and move immediately outside to assembly area. Use non-motorized vehicles such as carts and bikes, or walk. Meet in the closest assembly area. See map on the next slide.
The red signs on the evacuation map indicate the emergency assembly areas. Contractors will evacuate and check in with their facility staff at the southeast corner of the construction enabling area, known as Area C. Contractors must remain aware of the potential for emergency situations and respond appropriately. Work can recommence only after the facility staff directs the contractor to return to work and an all clear is given.
If you are at the facility and require emergency assistance, such as a medical emergency, contact the computer room by radio or at 408-635-4000. For emergency services response from police, fire, or ambulance services, it is necessary for the computer room and other personnel to assist emergency services to your location. Additionally, your project manager may give you a site radio for your use. Use the radio to call the computer room for emergency assistance. Let the computer room know your exact location. The computer room will also call 911 if needed. All incidents, including injuries, near misses, vehicle incidents, property damage, or spills, must be reported to the computer room immediately and secondarily to the project manager. Horseplay, fighting, or harassment while on facility premises is strictly prohibited. Theft of facility, contractor, or personal property is prohibited and may, at the San Jose, Santa Clara Regional Wastewater Facility's sole discretion, be referred to local law enforcement authorities with jurisdiction for prosecution. All vehicles must be parked in approved parking lots or, if necessary, out of the way of traffic patterns. Only vehicles required for the job are allowed on the job site. Vehicles must not be left idling when unattended unless there is a legitimate business reason to do so. Parking permits may be required. Consult with your site project manager. The provision of appropriate personal protective equipment for contractor personnel shall be the sole responsibility of the contractor. At a minimum, workers must wear safety shoes at the facility. Contractors will assess the hazards of their work and determine additional personal protective equipment as needed and follow PPE signage at the facility. Steel-toed shoes, safety glasses, and hearing protection are the most common items required. Contractors are to follow best safety practices and signage. Contractors are required to wear appropriate footwear. All shoes must be of leather and/or rubber and suited for the hazard. Safety toe footwear may be required and must meet ANSI Z41.1 ratings. Open-toed shoes, tennis shoes, sports shoes, or sandals are not permitted. Hearing protection is required in high noise areas, 85 decibels or greater. Many of these areas have warning signs posted. A rule of thumb for high noise is that if you have difficulty hearing and understanding normal speech due to background noise, you probably need hearing protection. If you go into the area, even briefly, please wear the required hearing protection. Contractors are required to wear appropriate work clothing. Loose clothing, unsecured long hair, finger rings, and other similar accessories are not permitted around rotating equipment or electrical switchgear. When required at the facility or regulatory requirements, the contractor shall provide their personnel with respiratory protective equipment. The contractor must assure that their personnel are trained and qualified in the use of the equipment. All personnel wearing a respirator must be clean-shaven in the respirator seal area to ensure a proper fit and seal. When working over water, appropriate personal flotation devices meeting U.S. Coast Guard standards are required. Contact your supervisor for any questions.
As in many outdoor workplaces, the facility has insects on site. Please be aware of your surroundings and wear bug repellent as needed. Bug repellents and sprays for personal use on one's body is permitted and reporting is not required. However, pesticides, rodenticides, and herbicides applied around the facility and buildings can only be applied by someone who is certified with an applicator's license. All applications must be reported on the Pesticide Toxicity Control SharePoint database. Bees or spiders may be found in outdoor sheds and vaults. When opening an outdoor container or vault, it is best practice to open the door and step aside, allowing any bees to leave. Assess the container and proceed if cleared to do so. West Nile virus, spread from mosquito bites, has been found within a few miles of this wastewater facility. In humans, West Nile virus causes mild to severe flu-like symptoms such as fever, headache, body ache, and in severe cases, significant neurological symptoms or even deaths. When possible, wear long-sleeve shirts and long pants whenever you are outdoors.
Hazard notification, often designated by signs and barricades, must be followed by all contractors. Physical barricades and colored barricade tape are also used to mark the entrance into work locations where known or suspected hazards exist. Chemical storage tanks and containers use signs and labels to identify hazards. Stay out of areas that are not necessary for your work tasks. All contractors and their personnel are required to perform their activities in strict accordance with local, state, and federal laws and regulations. Contractors must also meet or exceed the facility's safety standards as found in our safety programs. The contractor is responsible for ensuring that their workers have the proper training for the job tasks and safety procedures that are applicable to the job. Safety data sheets are provided for raw materials, products, and materials stored or used on site. These documents will be made available upon request. All chemicals provided by the contractor and brought on or into the facility by the contractor requires an SDS. Upon request, copies of any or all SDSs must be available. Chemical approval for contractor is required by the Site Safety Department. Submit a chemical authorization request form to the project manager, who will then submit the SDS to the Safety Department for review. Work permits, such as hot work, confined space entry, or critical lift, may be required for your activities at the facility. If you have any questions about the necessity for a specific work permit, please check with your site project manager. If a permit is required, the work cannot start until after the proper permit is issued. Permits will be provided by the shift supervisor. In summary, any question regarding a permit or procedure should be discussed with the project manager before work begins. Hot work permits are an essential part of the facility safety program. Hot work is defined as hot cutting, welding, grinding, use of open flames, oxyacetylene gas burning, sandblasting that creates sparks, or the use of any electrical tools or devices that are not explosion-proof or intrinsically safe in or near a classified area. Welding shops, general construction fabrication yards, and areas known not to have hydrocarbons present are excluded from these requirements by local supervision management. A hot work permit is required for all hot work within 35 feet of any threaded or flanged pipe connection, vent source, flammable liquid storage or dispensing area, process equipment, tanks that handle flammable products, or within any facility containing such products. Hot work permits will list the site-specific precautions, and the project manager will designate the requirements when issuing the permit. Contractor personnel receiving the permit are responsible for understanding and abiding by all the requirements of the permit. The following standard conditions are to be followed with all hot work permits. Emergency conditions or evacuation immediately cancels the work permit. All work will be shut down immediately, and a new permit is required once the emergency situation is cleared. The hot work permit will be posted at the work site. The work area will be monitored for changing conditions as the job is performed. The contractor is responsible for providing a fire watch, gas detection equipment, and fire extinguishers. The fire watch will remain on site and vigilant for at least half an hour after the work is stopped. The maximum duration of any hot work permit is 12 hours, the end of the shift, or the end of work, whichever occurs first. If the work takes longer than 12 hours or end of shift, a new permit must be initiated and issued. The permit requires that lower explosive limit levels be determined prior to the start of work. Hot work is not permitted in a confined space when the lower explosive limit levels exceed 10%. Management approval is required for any hot work permit when the lower explosive limit levels exceed 10%. The San Jose Santa Clara Regional Wastewater Facility has a lockout-tagout program. If a contractor has their own program, and this program offers a level of protection which is greater than or equal to the facility's program, then upon agreement by the project manager, the contractor's program may be utilized. All contract personnel who conduct lockout-tagout must be trained in procedures for the control of hazardous energy. Sources of hazardous energy include, but are not limited to, electrical, mechanical, hydraulic, pneumatic, or stored pressure. There are many water and sludge sources here at the facility. Work with the area supervisor to ensure all sources are controlled. Group lock boxes can be used where all keys are placed in a locked supervisor box with a controlled locking procedure. Contractors are required to provide their personnel with locks, lockout hardware, and tags for their use at the facility. The lotto locks and tags must not be used for any purpose other than lockout-tagout. The keys must be under the exclusive control of the contractor personnel. Employee name, company name, and date are required on the tag. Lockout-tagout activities are often coordinated with the site facility area supervisors and a group lockout box utilized. Contractor work at the facility may require entry into a confined space. Examples of confined spaces include, but are not limited to, tanks, vessels, underground vaults, cooling towers, excavations, manholes, clarifiers, aerators, digesters, wells, sump pits, and pipes. Entry into a confined space is defined by breaking the plane by any part of the body. A written confined space entry permit is required for entry into any confined space. Contractors entering confined space may use their own permits if their program offers a level of protection which is greater than or equal to the facility's program. Use of contractor permits and procedures is contingent upon approval by the project manager. All confined space permits are valid for a maximum period of 12 hours, the end of the shift, or the end of the work, whichever occurs first. If entry will exceed these time limits, or the scope of the job changes, the entry will cease and a new permit must be issued. All confined space entries are to follow the facility's requirements and Cal OSHA regulations. Any questions concerning confined space and permitting should be directed to the project manager. Contractors performing confined space activities are required to have up-to-date California OSHA compliant confined space training including hands-on, a written confined space entry program meeting California OSHA requirements, and a site-specific confined space entry plan, including but not limited to details on the space you plan to enter, equipment you will use, a rescue plan, air monitoring, ventilation, communication plan, and permit. Contractors must provide the required equipment and training to their personnel. This equipment may include, but is not limited to, atmospheric monitoring equipment, rescue harness and lifelines, supplied air equipment, and communication devices. Contractor must provide their own on-site rescuer if entering into a permit-required confined space. Talk to your site project manager about any confined space entry plans in advance of entry. Contractor work at the facility may require excavation or trenching. Entry into an excavation greater than 4 feet may require a confined space entry permit. A contractor performing excavation and trenching work is required to provide a competent person for the job. The competent person must have the authority and responsibility to determine the required sloping and cave-in precautions and protection necessary for the work. The competent person is required to make daily inspections prior to the start of the work shift. The contractor is responsible for supplying cave-in protection and erecting barricades to mark the limits of the work area and to protect personnel from unattended excavations. Before opening any excavation or trenching, all required permits must be obtained and the location of underground utilities and piping must be determined. The one-call or appropriate local notification system for contacting utilities and other affected parties must be made prior to the start of the activities. Spoil piles from the excavation must be at least 2 feet back from the trench. Fall protection equipment must be used when performing work activities at heights 6 feet or greater above the working or walking surface. Fall protection equipment is required when operating mobile lifts and elevated platforms. All contractor personnel must be trained in the application and use of fall protection when exposed to fall hazards. Fall arrest systems are to be used when other fall protection systems are impractical. The contractor is responsible for determining and providing the required fall protection equipment for the work. The use of waist belts and non-locking snap hooks are prohibited as part of a fall protection system. If working above water, personnel must also wear a life jacket.
During renovations in 2012 and 2013, railings installed were tested at a strength exceeding the 200-pound requirement, and no posts failed at 250 pounds. Railings are rated for personnel protection to a standard of 200 pounds of force. Where railings are not in place, fall protective measures may be required.
Ladders must be OSHA compliant. All ladders must be used only for their designed intent. All ladders must be inspected prior to use for any defects that would make them unsafe. Ladders must be placed on firm level surfaces and set at the required angle. Extension ladders are to be tied off. Consider whether a ladder is the best equipment for the job at hand. A scissor lift or scaffold may be safer and save time. Scaffolding must be erected and disassembled under the direction of a competent person. Scaffolding must be sturdy, outfitted with handrails, midrails, and toe boards. Scaffolding must be inspected and tagged daily by a competent person to certify its suitability for work conditions and protective equipment requirements. Seat belts must be used while operating forklifts, cranes, tractors, bulldozers, backhoes, and other vehicles for which seat belts have been provided. All personnel involved in the operation of cranes and rigging must be qualified. All operations must be in accordance with applicable regulations and site procedures. Obtain a critical lift permit for lifts greater than 1 ton. Use taglines to control and guide the load. Personnel must wear hard hats, and the work and lift zone must be controlled with barricades. All personnel involved in the operation of aerial lifts must be properly trained. A full body harness must be worn during the operation of an aerial lift. Contractors should make note of the location of safety equipment such as eye wash stations and safety showers when they come on site. Any problems with site safety equipment should be reported to the project manager immediately. Such safety equipment may require repair prior to the contractor commencing or continuing work. AEDs are located throughout the site, and many personnel on site are trained in CPR and AED. Contact the computer room for emergencies at 408-635-4000 or by using a facility radio. Prevention of fires is a primary goal at the San Jose Santa Clara Regional Wastewater Facility. The facility requires all contractors and their personnel to follow established work procedures and to use good fire prevention practices. Class A fire materials should be minimized in process areas and discarded properly. Flammable and combustible liquids are to be used in only well-ventilated areas. Fuels and other flammable or combustible liquids, including but not limited to gasoline, diesel, and propane, shall be transported only in approved safety containers with the contents clearly marked. When transferring flammable or combustible liquids from a barrel, tank, line, or vessel to another container, the containers need to be electrically bonded. Never fill portable containers in the bed of a truck. Previously opened combustible or flammable liquid containers or aerosol cans are to be stored in flammable storage cabinets. Do not store combustible or flammable liquids in compressor buildings unless in an approved flammable storage cabinet. Dispose of oil-soaked rags in an approved container and empty daily. Fire extinguishers are only for incipient stage fires. Only trained and knowledgeable personnel should operate fire extinguishers. The contractor is responsible for locating the fire extinguishers in the area of their work. Company fire extinguishers that have been used or otherwise discharged must be returned to the project manager immediately. All powered equipment must be industrial in design, and contract personnel must be trained on its use. Equipment must be in good operating condition. Forklifts must be inspected prior to use. No safety guards or devices may be altered or removed. All key safety features must be operational. For example, lights, horns, brakes, backup alarms, etc. All power cords must be 3-pronged with a ground prong. 110 volt or greater power cords must be a minimum of 12 gauge and free of any cuts or abrasions. Power cord connections must be kept out of standing water. Portable cord and plug connected equipment shall be inspected prior to use. The use of ground fault protection or double insulation is required. The contractor is responsible for proper storage, transportation, and use of compressed gas cylinders. Keep cylinders away from direct flame, heat, and ignition sources. Cylinders are to be stored in an upright, secured position. Oxygen cylinders are to be stored at least 20 feet away from combustible materials. The exception to this rule is when there is a 5-foot high fire-resistant wall separating oxygen cylinders and flammables. All cylinders must be properly labeled. Cylinder valves are to remain closed and protective caps in place when cylinders are not in use or are being transported. A handle or other shut-off device must be in place when the cylinder valve is open. All air hoses and air hose connections shall be of the proper type and rated for the use intended. Air hoses shall not be used for any other services, including but not limited to nitrogen and chemicals. Crow's foot connections shall use safety clips or other similar devices to prevent the air hose from unintentionally disconnecting. Per OSHA regulations, compressed air shall never be used to clean either workers or their clothing, as the worker could be injured. When using a pressure washer, use personal protective equipment, including but not limited to safety glasses or goggles and hearing protection. Abrasive blasting will require the contractor to obtain a hot work permit for the work. Prior to conducting any sandblasting, the paint to be removed must be tested for lead or otherwise ascertained by prior documentation that the paint is lead-free. When lead is present, removal of lead-contaminated paint will require additional facility approval. Waste blasting media from lead paint removal may require capture and disposal in accordance with appropriate regulatory and air district requirements. Painting product safety data sheets are to be submitted, reviewed, and approved to your project manager and site safety prior to use. All work areas must be kept clean after the work is completed or the end of the shift. All tools, power cords, welding leads, and utility hoses are to be picked up and properly stored daily. Exit pathways are to be kept clear, including remote areas such as tunnels or equipment buildings. All stage supplies are to be stacked out of walkways and not pose a tripping hazard or limit operations. All debris is to be swept clean and properly disposed. Washing down of work areas with utility water is allowed with prior approval from operations personnel. No pollutants are to be washed down into drains or sumps. Garbage cans brought on site for the disposal of trash must be placed out of access ways and have tight sealing lids. Contractors are required to comply with all applicable environmental laws and regulations. Check with your project manager regarding environmental health and safety questions, such as waste disposal, waste manifests, chemicals that can be used, where to store chemicals, and capture or control of any air contaminants, such as dust. Contractors must comply with the requirements of local, state, and federal regulations concerning spill prevention. This includes, but is not limited to, having appropriate containment for tanks and other containers of oil and other regulated chemicals if required, have a spill prevention control and countermeasures plan, have drip pans and other containment under equipment and inspecting tanks and other containers. The contractor is responsible for all spills and releases from their operations and equipment. The contractor must report all spills to the project manager or shift supervisor. The contractor must promptly report all reportable spills for which the contractor is responsible to the appropriate regulatory agency. The contractor is responsible for the proper storage, transportation, and disposal of any waste that the contractor generates while on the facility. This includes, but is not limited to, waste from temporary offices, meal wastes, or waste from equipment maintenance such as lube oil, hydraulic oil, filters, paint, and solvents. If you have any questions about waste disposal for hazardous waste, contact your site project manager. On behalf of San Jose Santa Clara Regional Wastewater Facility Management, we thank you for your time and attention to this program. We appreciate your work, and it is our heartfelt desire that you have a safe and productive experience while here at our facility. If you have any questions about this presentation, please contact your project manager as soon as possible before beginning any work. Once again, thank you and be safe, both on and off the job. Please sign the contractor training sign-in sheet. This ends this training presentation.